So a fascinating and horrendous story about the Clapham attacker, alleged Clapham attacker. This is an Afghan refugee suspected of a chemical attack on a family in Clapham in southwest London. Apparently, according to Home Office rules, should not have been granted asylum in the first place. He was convicted in 2018 for a sexual assault in Newcastle. He was included in the sex offenders register, which should have barred him from asylum, but it was approved by an immigration judge on his third appeal after he converted to Christianity. Tell you what's not very Christian: throwing acid in someone's face, if that is indeed what he did. The guidance is, where a person is required to sign the sex offenders register, you must refuse or cancel entry, clearance or permission on the grounds of serious harm. So what on earth happened here? Well, a man who's going to decode this for us is Henry Bolton, who's Borders and International Security Advisor. Hello, Henry.
Hi, Peter.
Thank you for coming into the studio this morning. What went wrong?
Oh,
so much.
A whole series of things have gone wrong. Just to say, on his third appeal, Yvette Cooper, the Shadow Home Secretary, has written to James Cleverly, the Home Secretary, asking whether or not the Home Office made representations at the third appeal, where he was granted leave to remain. And it's an interesting question, that, because my understanding is around about 21% of these appeals that are lodged by asylum seekers who have had their claim turned down by the Home Office, they then appeal. But around about 1 in 5 or so of these appeal hearings are not attended by a Home Office lawyer. And if they are not attended by a Home Office lawyer, then the judge, by default, automatically,
yeah. If you have in most cases, if you have a court case in this country, you don't turn up, well, then they give it to the other person.
Right. And so I don't know the answer to that question, but Yvette Cooper has asked it.
Yes.
It's a very pertinent question to ask. But you know, it's not only this case. If that's happened in this case, it's not the only one. As I say, it's about 1 in 5 of these hearings that applies to. They just don't turn up. So these appeals are automatically granted, no matter what the history of the person who's appealing. So that's an important point. But there's a whole series of issues here, Peter, that are failings.
Just before you get into those feelings, and there are many of them, I just want to remind people what this guy is actually accused of doing. This is Abdul Ezedi. Manhunt continuing. Police still haven't found him, despite the fact he has very serious facial injuries himself. New CCTV images of him in various parts of London have been released. He attacked a 31-year-old mother with a corrosive substance. He's alleged to have done this. She's described by police as very poorly, with injuries that are expected to be life-changing. Her daughters, aged 3 and 8, were also allegedly attacked, although they're not as serious as first thought and not likely to be life-changing. So this person, this asylum seeker who was granted asylum, allegedly, and he's not been convicted of anything, we need to be careful, but this is a live court case. Well, he hasn't been found, hasn't been charged with anything, but he is alleged to have attacked a 31-year-old mother with a corrosive substance, and also alleged to attack a 3-year-old and an 8-year-old. Henry, tell us about the feelings, why this guy was in the country in the first place.
Well, they're legion, Peter, and we could spend hours talking about them. Everything from the point at which people arrive, the way that they're processed, because they're taken inland to a processing centre. I mean, for example, Manston, which people will have heard about. When there were problems in relation to Manston, so the occupants, the asylum seekers who'd come across the channel, were then shipped out to various locations around the United Kingdom. During that process, a lot of these people skipped the security checks. Now, it's very difficult to vet somebody who says that they've come from a village, I don't know, in Syria.
Perhaps don't have any documents.
Don't have any documents. You don't really know where they've come from. I know of plenty of cases in terms of Albanians that have claimed to come from Albania, where they've actually come from the Republic of Northern Macedonia or Kosovo. And it's very difficult to check that unless your asylum staff have detailed knowledge of these places that people claim to have come from and have researched it deeply. Well, they haven't. So we've got a problem in terms of the staffing of the asylum system. We've got a problem in terms of the training and the depth of knowledge and the understanding, the grasp, if you like, that the people operating this system have got. But these people are, first of all, being brought into the UK, not kept secure before they've been vetted. So, you know, there's failing number one all the way through this. Then we've got the process, as I say, itself, which is not nobody can look at the questions that are being asked and accept that they are thorough and robust. It strikes me, I mean, if I sum this up, that the emphasis here is on looking after the welfare in a very charitable manner, a very generous manner, the welfare of somebody who comes across the channel, without considering the safety, the security of the British people. And that should be first, and I don't believe it is, both in cultural attitude within the system, but also in the process. Now, I know I'm not being particularly detailed here, because what needs to happen, and I'm afraid what is going to happen here with this Ezedi case, is that the Home Secretary, because of the publicity and the horrific attack that's taken place, the Home Secretary is going to order, and I understand actually has already ordered, an investigation into this particular case. Look, it's not this particular case. We've got people who have come into the UK, committed terrorist attacks, and they've been asylum seekers. There's a raft of cases where people have been convicted of rapes and serious other crimes that are asylum seekers. Yes, if you like, the indigenous British population commits these attacks as well. But these are people often with a history of these sort of assaults before they've come here, and we've only found out after the case. So what we need to do is we need to go right back, and we need to redesign. And I know this sounds to people as though it will take ages and we've got a here and now problem. I'll come back to that. But we need to redesign the entire chain of
Henry,
how these people are managed when they get here, all the way through to the time that they're given asylum.
Even if it does take a little bit of time to redesign, I say start now.
Absolutely. I've been saying it for years, Peter. And one of the Post Office Horizon scandal, there were people who knew what they were talking about, who warned the government. Tony Blair was warned, the civil service and officials were warned, an accountancy company warned the post office, and nobody did anything about it. And then we've had tragic consequences for postmasters and postmistresses, and are now a political scandal, quite rightly so. And people have had to resign. We shouldn't have got to this stage, 20 years on. Now, with borders and with this immigration process, there are those of us, myself, Tony Smith, former DG of Border Force, and so on, others, who know what they're talking about, have been warning the government, your system is not robust, it's not safe for
Let's just see what is in front of us. I just want to get some viewer reaction, viewer and listener reaction here. Ruth has been in touch on text. She says the question here is not if he should have been granted asylum. He should not, but he should have been deported when the first asylum application was turned down. How many are walking the streets where the asylum application has been refused but have not been deported? Our government is keeping us safe? Ruth doesn't seem to think so. Chris in Newbury has also been in touch to say, Peter, you have to focus on the Church of England and their complicity in faking these people's applications. There will be vicars around the country on multiple applications pronouncing conversion from Islam to Christianity. Surely arrests of vicars who have been part of this con must now be on the cards. Well, there's no suggestion that the vicar who was involved in this particular attestation, presumably, was duped or thought he or she was doing the wrong thing. Because faith is a very difficult thing to prove, Henry, but it is nonetheless part of these things. Look, if someone is a Muslim, that doesn't necessarily mean they should get asylum in this country. But what he was saying was that his allegation was that he was converted to Christianity and had turned away from any form of Islam, or indeed radical Islam.
Indeed. Look, you can claim, there are some countries now where we've got case law now where we've had somebody convicted of rape, and because he's been convicted of rape in this country, if he is returned to his own country, he will then get punished again by that country, probably more severely than here. So we can't deport him. Actually committing rape is now a defence to being removed.
We're protecting rapists.
All of these things need to be reviewed, Peter. And, so it's a very difficult thing to say, what should we do? What we should do is, as I've just said, redesign the whole system from start to finish. And all of the elements of it, everything from the operational aspects of Border Force, to how we disrupt organised crime, to the way that we actually receive these people in the UK. For example, I think we've had this conversation before. If you arrive at an airport in the UK, let's say Stansted or Luton, you arrive, nobody can dispute, it's well inside the United Kingdom's territory. But for immigration purposes, you are not deemed to have entered the country until you've transited immigration controls. And if you come in without the right documents, you can then be put straight on a flight and sent back. And you can detain people airside. Now, we don't have that legal or physical facility on our maritime borders. Now, the Italians had a major problem with small boats coming across from Albania some years ago. And that's exactly what they did. They created that same sort of facility on their maritime borders as they had on their air borders. So you've got that. They were able. It was easier to return people straight away without putting them through the judicial process. The other thing to say is that the government is still operating basically on procedures that were designed under what was called the Dublin
Henry,
III Agreement.
I'm sorry, I have to just stop you there. We'll come back to you in a second, Henry. We just have some breaking news, and this is on the Middle East, the airstrikes that have been happening. Iraq has warned of disastrous consequences. The US response will continue, says Biden. We've had a statement here. America said that it has told the country about the strikes before they took place. Iraq has denied that they were told about the strikes, accusing the US of disavowing legal responsibility, misleading international public opinion. The Iraqi government has said attacks were launched against the sovereignty of Iraq as security force locations and neighbouring civilian areas were bombed, as they put it, by several American aircraft. Well, the Americans don't deny that. 16 people, apparently, including civilians, were killed in the strike. 25 others were wounded. The Iraqi government says this aggressive strike will put security in Iraq and the region on the brink of the abyss, and it also contradicts efforts to establish the required stability. Iraq reiterates its refusal to let its lands be an arena for settling scores, and all parties must realise this. The attacks were against alleged Iranian targets. Iraqi government continues, our country's land and sovereignty are not the appropriate place to send messages and show force between opponents. The Iraqi government will make every effort required by moral, national and constitutional responsibility to protect our land, our cities and the lives of children in all types of armed forces. Well, that's the breaking news in terms of what the Iraqi government has said. We will, of course, bring you the latest on this throughout the programme. We're talking about it later on with a security expert. Also, on the particular issue we're talking about with Henry Bolton, Borders and International Security Advisors, here in the studio on the Afghan asylum seeker, refugee who's been given asylum in this country after a number of appeals. Abdul Ezedi, who is accused of that horrendous attack, acid attack. So more messages here. How many of the Afghan attacker's family are also here, and how? That's a question we don't know the answer to, but we do know there were properties that were associated with his family that were searched. Dan has been in touch, says, morning Peter, surely there's evidence of who is allowing or overturning decisions on asylum seekers like the one in question. Why can't these people be traced and booted from the Home Office, even possibly charged after the damage they cause? Mick says, because the church was instrumental in Ezedi being allowed to stay in the UK, they should financially support his victims for the rest of their lives, says Mick. That's one idea. Lots more on this. I want to get the views of Greg in Edinburgh, who's given me a call on 0344 499 1000. Greg, you're on with me, but also Henry Bolton is listening to you as well. Good morning, welcome to the programme. What would you like to say?
Yeah, it's just it's to point out the one aspect of the abuse of the system, the asylum system. It's really concerning the number of people that claim, either to be Christian, converted to Christianity, or they're claiming that they're gay. It seems like they're being coached to a certain extent by people in the immigration advice.
Henry, you're nodding your head. Are people coached in this, do you think?
They absolutely are coached. There are NGOs, charities, if you like, that are coaching them. There are immigration lawyers that are coaching them. There are the people who have already gone through the system, if you like, in the asylum community here in the UK, who are coaching them, people that they know, people who they've had contact with. There is a coaching process all the way through, and that's why it is so worrying when you get somebody, for example, whose removal from the UK is prevented because they've been convicted of rape in this country. That now becomes a defence. Now, I'm not saying that all asylum seekers who are going to appeal their case are going to go out there and commit rape, but it might incite some to. And in this case, again, you've got the Christian conversion. Well, they're corrupting the church. And I suspect that if indeed...
Why do they convert to Christianity? Well,
because then they can claim that they're going to be persecuted back in their own country
being Christian.
Being Christian in an Islamic country.
So it's not necessarily to do with religion. It's not to do with faith, I should say.
No. This is a way of gaming the system and saying, well, you can't send me that back there because if you do, I'm going to be persecuted because I am a Christian. And it's a very difficult one to sort of identify. Is that correct or is that not correct? Are you being sincere about this? And this is a function partly of having 3 appeals, which goes back to really the Dublin III agreement, which was the agreement we used to have with the European Union, whereby we had to give them 3 appeals, one appeal after the other, before we could then deport them and then or remove them. And then we had to have the agreement of the country that we were sending it to, and so on. Now, we haven't changed that procedure yet. So the Home Office has been slow in reviewing all of this. And we're focused in on one case, and I would rather that we come out, step back a bit from it, and say, look, this is one case, but we've had legions of cases.
There's loads of this around.
And what we need to do is not focus on what specifically went wrong with this case, whether there was a priest involved or whether there was... But what are all of the exceptions? How does this system... How is it functioning or not functioning?
The system just doesn't work, Greg,
It's got to be redesigned.
Greg, the system just doesn't work. It's not fair, is it?
No, and my point when I phoned was that we've got to a really ironic stage that people that find they've committed serious sexual offences like this chap has, or other has, whatever.
Well, he's not accused of sexual offences, but there certainly are some asylum seekers who have done that.
He's been convicted.
You're right.
He was
has
convicted
previously
by a court in Newcastle.
Apologies, I got that wrong. Yes, he was previously convicted in Newcastle. Apologies.
Now, what I'm saying is society, quite rightly, here finds these offences repugnant, and we don't want people like this in this country. And yet, the repugnance of other countries' people towards these offences trumps ours, because they're saying, "Oh, I can't be sent back to X country because I might be oppressed, or people might treat me badly in that country." So we have to look after. Or we have to house and pay for people.
I mean, the logic is, Greg, I think it's mad logic, but the logic is we treat them humanely in prison, for example, or in the community, whereas if he got sent back to Afghanistan having been convicted of sexual offences, he might be tortured or something like that. Henry?
Greg brings up a point there, Greg, if I may. I think what you're trying to say is, I mean, I spent 27 months in Helmand in Afghanistan, and senior members of the community, district governors and so on, had T-boys. Now, these were sort of 11, 12-year-old young boys who would sleep with the governors, but they made tea. They were called T-boys. And now that's normal behaviour. Afghan society in those rural areas accepts that as normality. Families would every now and again, once a year or so, bring their young boys to the governor's compound, who would select the T-boy he wanted for the next sort of 12 months or whatever. Now that. And then the governor would pay. There would be benefits for the family. They'd have the patronage of the government. It is absolutely horrendous. That young lad doesn't get any say in it. But how does he grow up? How does that? What is the normal? What are the normal social norms in that community? And then we accept asylum seekers from that community. Now, you can make excuses. You can say, well, they're traumatised from youth or they're whatever. But the fact is that then we bring them into this country. We spend years and years just putting them through the asylum process before there's a removal. And then so few of them get removed. They end up staying here. And there's no integration. They come here and they don't actually, and I'm not excusing them, they don't even know that we have different values in many cases.
And that's a whole other problem.
And that places the public at risk.
It certainly does. Henry, we've got to leave it there, but thank you very much.
Sorry,
indeed.
Greg, I took a bit of time.
And thanks to Greg and Edinburgh as well. We've got to leave it there.